And good afternoon. How you doing? It's Thursday, July 11th, 2024, and it's been a minute since we had a Deering Live. So wonderful to see you, sir.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
It is. Why have we been away? I don't even know. It's just been a little quiet on the Deering Live front. We've been doing other things.
Yeah.
Hope everybody who's watching is well. Had a wonderful and safe July 4th weekend. And let's get on with this show because it's going to be a good one. I do want to start off just on a slightly poignant note, but just before we get started, just to take a very quick moment to remember and dedicate the show in particular to the memory of Joe Bonsall, who many of you will know sadly passed away yesterday, a longtime founding member of the Oak Ridge Boys, and definitely an influence for many over the years. So thank you for all of your banjo-related just service and just being a staple of the scene in general. So memory to Joe.
Yeah.
All right. So today we are thrilled to welcome longtime Deering artist and friend and legend, Mr. Tony Trischka. And today we're going to be discussing all manner of topics, not least of all, Tony's stunning new album, Earl Jam, his brilliant ArtistWorks school, and possibly we might get into what we will have for breakfast, because that was a hot topic in the backstage area, but we'll discuss that in more detail. We will be joined by Marcus from ArtistWorks to talk about some new developments there. And of course, why most of you are sitting watching at home, I'm sure, we will be announcing the winner of our much anticipated Earl Jam giveaway that closed this past Tuesday. So we're going to get deep into things. I think, Dave, I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, this is going to be fun.
Can we just make sure that Manager Ben he's out of the room? We're good? Everything's great? I think we're good. Tony's safe. Let's bring him in, Mr. Tony Trischka. Yeah. Hey, Tony, how you doing?
Hey, Jamie. Hey, Dave. Good to see you. Great to be with you again.
Great to have you here.
Yeah.
You're looking at how's it been? How's life?
Life is good. Life is good. And staying busy, gigging, have the new album out, and doing my ArtistWorks video exchanges with students, and just enjoying life. Yeah.
That's awesome. The album's incredible.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm very excited for you, and you seem to be getting a lot of very positive coverage for it. I think you were just announced as the Bluegrass Situation Artist of the Month, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I just found out about that a few days ago, which is very exciting. So much appreciation to those folks out there in California, who I think that's where they're located.
Yeah, and in San Francisco.
Yeah, and I'm excited that my album has been doing very well on Amazon, the bluegrass sales, and for a while there, I was second only to Elvis Presley in the bluegrass division.
Yeah, so, Elvis plays mean banjo.
He's one of my favorite bluegrass musicians, actually. So yeah,
rocking,
exactly.
I think if we're gonna stay on kind of a theme of like just bluegrass related things, like I think an Elvis album is next in your repertoire, potentially.
Okay, if you say so, I'm there.
Yeah, I'm in
Elvis Jam.
I'll get with Ben offline. We'll figure it
out. Please do.
I certainly will. Well, it's wonderful to be back on Deering Live to see everyone's very, very wonderful faces. And it's wonderful that you're our first guest back in a little while. Couldn't think of anyone more suited. But we have to stay with tradition. So if you wouldn't mind, you want to kick things off with a little tune, that would be just wonderful for all of us.
Sure. I'll do a tune from the Earl Jam album, which came about. Without getting into too much detail, I got a hold of these recordings of Earl Scruggs and John Hartford recording jam sessions from the mid-'80s through the mid-'90s. Sometimes just the two of them, sometimes with other folks added in like Sam Bush or Tony Rice or Del McCoury or Mac Wiseman. Anyway, this is one of the tunes that was in one of those jams. Lots of things we never heard Earl do, or tunes that we'd heard him do before, but adding all sorts of really interesting things in them. So this is a tune called the Chinese Breakdown. Just a little bit. This is pretty much note for note the way Earl played it in this jam session.
Yeah. Well, Tony, congratulations on the album. It really is a great album. When I first put it on, there's a sound to it. It just sounds like an old album. There's something about it. What is that? I don't know. There's something, just the first impression. It sounds older than a modern sort of type of album.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure if I could explain that. I'm not sure exactly why. The first tune is with Billy Strings, a tune called Brown Story Blues. It was produced by Bela Fleck, but a lot of it, I think, is due to the engineer, Lawson White, who I've been using for several albums, and he's down in Nashville. And he just has this, he puts 5 mics on my banjo, which is one thing. And he can really control the sound in a whole lot better way than having just 1 or 2 mics on the banjo. So I'd say a lot of the credit goes to him for just the general sound of the banjo. And I had told him, since it's an Earl project, to see if he could try to at least capture some of the sound that Earl Scruggs got on his Foggy Mountain Banjo album, which was recorded around 1960, 59, 60, somewhere in there, which is the best banjo album ever made, and forevermore will be.
Yeah. And so, you had the story of how this album came to be. You got a hold of these tapes of these jams, and then you put together a concert, right? Playing some of these tunes, was it? And then somebody suggested that you make a record out of it. Was that the way it went?
Yeah, well, a dear friend of mine, Ken Irwin, who I've known, he started Rounder Records along with Marion Layton and Bill Nowlin in 1970, thereabouts. And the very first album I was ever on was with Country Cooking from Rounder Records, for Rounder Records in 71. But anyway, they got out of the business some years ago and decided to get back into it. So the 3 original Rounders started Down the Road Records. So Ken Irwin heard that I was doing this and thought, well, maybe we should put this on Down the Road. And that's how it came to pass.
Right. How'd you go about song selection? Because you had a lot. It was hours and hours of recorded, tapes that you had. Correct.
Correct.
To whittle
Yeah.
it down to the songs that you chose. How'd you go song selection, and then how'd you choose the personnel for each song? Because it does bounce around quite a bit from song to song.
Right. Yeah. Well, basically, I received a thumb drive from this guy, Bob Pekel, who was at some of these jam sessions. And John Hartford had said to him, in case my house burns down someday, you should have recordings of all these. Because John was the one who had recorded them on a cheap cassette machine. So he sent all the tapes to this guy, Bob Pekel, who in turn digitized it some years later. And Bob sent me a thumb drive with over 200 tunes. And it was like, oh my God, it's the Holy Grail. This is like unbelievable. And I started going through the tunes and going for the tunes that we'd never heard Earl play before, like Chinese Breakdown or Lady Madonna, and on. Or Bill Cheatham, that it's on the Strictly Instrumental album that Fred Scruggs did with Doc Watson, but there's no banjo break on it. So here's Bill Cheatham, and there were 5 versions of it from different recordings. Different jam sessions, and the first 4 didn't have there's no banjo solo, it was just fiddle and banjo, and the last one there's a banjo solo. So now I know how to play Bill Cheatham. Anyway, so I wanted to figure that out. So I started transcribing these tunes, the more obscure ones, that and Chinese Breakdown, Lady Madonna, etc., etc. My Horses Ain't Hungry, and I wrote out maybe 30 or 35 of these, and then I started thinking, well, maybe I should do an album of these things. And that's when Ken Irwin got into it. And the whole point of the album is, with the exception of one trailing off ending of Lady Madonna, every note I play is note for note what Earl played in these jam sessions. I wanted people to hear what Earl did, because probably these tapes will never see the light of day, because I found out recently that Earl never wanted these recordings to get out there in the general, to the general public. So certainly I'm not going to, I'm going to honor that wish of his.
Sure.
And so I think I'm even more glad that I was able to get these on the album. And there will be an Earl Jam 2 album. I recorded 26 tracks, 15 are on this one. And about a year from now, maybe a little less, there'll be a second Earl Jam.
Okay.
And in terms of choosing folks, a lot of it was my own idea. I wanted to get Billy Strings. I'd sat in with him a couple of times in some of his shows, and I recorded on Bela's Bluegrass Heart album with Billy. He was on that track, and it was just like he was blowing me away with the stuff he had done. So
Yeah.
I figured, and what a great singer too. So I really wanted to have him, and plus he sings Brown's Ferry Blues in some of these videos. And then I've known Molly Tuttle for a million years, and I really wanted to have her on there. And how could I not have Del McCurry on there, who I've known since the late '70s, and just sitting in with his band, because it was his band minus their banjo player Robbie. And it's just like, as I always say, sort of getting into a warm bath. It's so comfortable, and the groove is so deep, and it was just like, it was effortless, like a hot knife through butter or something. So it was fantastic getting to do that. And without going through every single person.
Yeah.
Ken Irwin had suggested Vince Gill. It was great, and was agreed to do it. And I'd only met Vince a couple of times, but I called him up once he'd agreed to do it, just to discuss what tunes. And he picked up the phone. He picked up the phone after I called him, and he said, "Hey, Banjo Man." So I knew things would go well. He's just a really great guy, really relaxed, and obviously his musicality is ridiculous. He's such a great singer and guitar player.
And so in each, except the then part of Lady Madonna, each solo break was what Earl played, but the backup parts is your own, right?
Right. The backup is all mine, but it's very influenced by Scruggs. So
Sure.
it's basically Earl's backup, not note for note, but informed by him.
And how did you? Because it sounds, you're playing transcriptions essentially,
Right.
but it doesn't sound like you're playing transcription. It sounds you have you in it still somehow. Like somewhere you did that perfect little crossover when you tried to play a transcription that you get the sound of the person you're transcribing, but it doesn't just sound like a computer kind of doing it. It sounds there's still soul in it.
Yeah, well, it's I have my touch on this Deering Golden Clipper plug. Which I used on just about every track on the album. But yeah, it's this banjo has my feel into it. I've been playing this for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it is on this track. And I have my own touch. It's not Earl's touch.
Mm-hmm. How would you suggest for people watching that are learning a transcription of anybody, of how to kind of get to that other side of it where it starts to sound musical, where they aren't just chasing the notes, but they really are owning it?
I think to own it, there's no magic answer to that besides just a lot of hard work. Just play it over and over and over and over again.
Right.
Like this first tune. It took me a long time before I could play that comfortably. But for these tunes on the album, I just spent a lot of time playing them beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, sometimes in the studio, it was a little hard to get it, but I finally did. But yeah, I would just say play it over and over again. Start slow, and then once you can play it comfortably, get with the metronome so your timing is really on, and think about tone. And plus, anyone who is playing is going to have their own touch on the instrument anyway. Plus, the way their banjo set up is unique to them. The picks they're using, there are all these banjo nerdy things. How tight is the head? Where's the tailpiece placement? Is it down or is it up? That sort of thing. So there's so many elements, and so each person is going to have, besides the technical aspects I just mentioned, it's just people have their own touch on the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
I had a chance to play Earl's banjo one time, maybe 12 or 13 years ago. I was in Missouri and backstage, and he was doing the show out there. And his road manager said, "Would you like to play the banjo?" The banjo, meaning Earl's banjo. They recorded everyone. Yeah, please. And so I went into Earl's dressing room, and he handed me his banjo, and I put on my picks and played a little bit of Ground Speed, which he recorded in 1960 on his Foggy Mountain Banjo album. And I couldn't get a sound out of it. It just didn't feel good, and I couldn't get a good sound out of it because it was so him. And then I handed it back to him, and he played something on it. And it sounded like Earl Scruggs. because he was, and yet
Right.
I couldn't get anything out of it. It was funny. I've never had that much difficulty getting sound out of a banjo as with his. So it's really interesting.
Right. Yeah, it shows how, how an artist and their instrument form a bond somehow.
Oh, definitely.
We've got a good question from viewer Joseph Brosk. He says, Earl Scruggs influenced everyone. During the course of this project, could you detect any influence of John Hartford on Earl?
Great question. No, I can't. I mean, Earl was so Earl, and John was playing the fiddle. So, and Earl never played fiddle. I mean, he played fiddle tunes, but in a Scruggsy sort of way. The only John influences, I haven't listened to every single moment of all 200 songs, but I've heard a lot of it. There's one tune where Earl's playing a low tune banjo, which I'm assuming was John Hartford, because he played down in E a lot, maybe sometimes in D, open E tuning or open D tuning. So it was a low tune solo that Earl took, which I'm assuming was John's banjo. So he's sort of, in that sense, kind of in a low tune sense, sounded like John. But no, I mean, Earl was so deep into his, he himself considered it Scruggs style that I don't think John could have had much influence on him that way.
Right.
Vice versa, of course, because Earl was one of John's heroes. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
How long did this recording process take place? Was it a fair amount of time? And did you do how much of it was done live versus done overdubs and whatnot?
I don't have exact dates right now. I'd say over a year and a half-ish, something like that. Because again, there were 26 tracks, so there was a lot to do. But in many cases, I would do 2 tracks or 3 tracks with each person. There's another Billy Strings, in addition to doing Brown's Ferry Blues. We did Gentle on My Mind, which will be on the second album. Did a couple of tunes with Molly Tuttle and a couple with Sierra Farrell. Actually, 3 with Sierra Farrell. But yeah, rather than going to Nashville and recording, over 5 days, and this is usually how I like to operate, is rather than go in and knock it out in 5 days, especially because a lot of times these are more conceptual albums, as it were. And this was that case in point. I'd go down and really focus on 2 tunes with one person, go home, and then come back down to Nashville and do another, 1 session with one group. In the case of Billy Strings and Molly Tuttle, those were done on 2 consecutive days. So that was the one exception.
And was it always recorded at the same studio?
Yeah, a studio called Parlor Studios, which is where my engineer Lawson White works out of. Except that we did a couple of sessions in New York City in a studio there. Still with Lawson White, but in a studio up there.
Yeah, because one thing that's interesting is because the danger of doing something over a long period of time and with lots of different people is it can start to lose the feel of an album. Like it can feel like a lot of different tracks that are put together, but this really sounds like a true album, like it's all a unit. Do you know how you kind of achieve that? Is there?
I mean, I think I'm the one consistent aspect of it. So the tone, the banjo is prominent, not too prominent. In fact, there are a lot of vocals on there. It's mostly a vocal album.
Yeah.
So it's the tone that I'm getting on the banjo, and it's all Scruggs style. It's all Earl's notes, with that minor exception that I mentioned. And again, the engineer, Lawson White's an incredible engineer, and he just got a consistent sound from each tune. Because sometimes the New York session, it's a different room and different mics and that sort of thing. But everything else was recorded in his studio in Nashville with his mics and using similar setups for, even if it's Sam Bush on mandolin or Ronnie McCurry, he's going to use the same mic setup pretty much. So there's consistency in mics and studio mics, with the exception of a couple of New York ones. Then he would adjust for that in the studio in the mixing process.
And then you kind of come full circle in a certain way, in that you're kind of known for being this trailblazer and rule breaker, and now you've made bluegrass albums in the past, but not as straight ahead as this, I guess, recently. And do you feel like you've kind of come full circle into your original banjo hero doing an album like this?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. I mean, I put out an album in kind of earlyish '80s called Hill Country, which was a very straight ahead album. But I was playing. I wrote my tunes to be very traditionally oriented tunes. But overall, I'm much more known as a, you know, someone who likes to break the rules and not be an exactly traditional banjo player. On my second album, Heartlands, I decided, okay, I'm going to record "Rolling My Sweet Baby's Arms," but I'll start with a drum solo, and that's the opening track on the album. So I could see someone, here's a traditional album, and then what the heck? What's this guy thinking? So I used to get some fairly wilting reviews in Bluegrass Unlimited and County Sales, which was in a mail order bluegrass world. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I remember was it the Duets album with Bela? Where you use wah on that one, I believe.
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah, I did Reuben's Train. The first song that Earl Scruggs played in the three finger style, and I played it solo, but with a wah-wah. So and I'd like to apologize for all of my transgressions over the years. Well, this album is my apology, I guess.
Well, when I was 15 years old, I loved that album. So.
Thank you, Dave. No wonder you're so warped. Okay.
So Bela produced Browns Ferry Blues. Is that the only one that he produced?
Yeah, that and Gentle on My Mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were the other tracks produced by somebody, or was it you're generally the producer?
Yes, self-produced, but Lawson White had a lot of input too, so he was the associate producer, if you will. And he definitely had some good ideas as well. But,
so what did you get out of Bela producing that track? What did he bring to the table there?
Well, he put the band together for one thing, which was great. I played a little bit with Michael Cleveland on the incredible fiddle player these days. I mean, there are many incredible fiddle players, but he's just ridiculous. And so Bela said, well, let's get Sam Bush. Well, duh, Mr. Groove, and he's such a great player. And then I've known Sam since 1965. And then Michael Cleveland, and then I wanted to get Billy on there, so he was already there. And then Mark Schatz, fortunately, was on the East Coast. He's moved to California, but he was, I think, up in Boston or something. We got him to come down, and he played with Bela for many years, and is still playing in his bluegrass harp thing. And he just did an incredible job. His bass playing is so amazing. I never recorded with him before, or hardly played with him before, but in all these years. And he's an old friend also. And plus, one of the tunes that's on in these jam sessions, and there's only one version of it, but going down the alphabetical list on the thumb drive, I get down and Here Comes the Bride. They did, and John and Earl did Here Comes the Bride, and it's just fiddle and banjo, and it starts with a fiddle solo with Earl backing him up, and it's just sort of like, it sounds like a fiddle tune, but it's an ornate version of Here Comes the Bride. And then almost from the beginning, John starts dancing. He does that buck and wing or whatever he would do, but it's just the two of them at home, probably at Earl's house. There's no audience to see it. And so I recreated that, and it'll be on the second album. I did it with Michael Cleveland. And we got, since Mark was there, got Mark Schatz to do the dance. Plus we got Sam to sing Here Comes the Bride, imitating Harry Carey, the voice of the Chicago Cubs. You won't believe it till you hear it, I'll put it that way. But it's on the second album, coming up.
All right. When is the second album due to be released?
We're not exactly sure yet. Roughly a year from now, though, maybe a little bit less, something like that.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Let's see. We have another question from a viewer, Throza58. Tony, you were playing the tablature note for note. Are you really reading the tablature, or is it more from memory?
Oh, great to see you here. We just did a video exchange. I was reading off the tablature. I really suffered for this project. Everyone else got to just do what they did. I had to follow, and Earl was doing some crazy stuff in some of these recordings. So yeah, I was just everything I did was reading off tablature because I wanted to make sure it was exactly what he played in these jam sessions. I could give an example, if I might, play the banjo for a moment. His solo. This is not exactly note for note since I don't have it in front of me, but the tablature that is. But mostly it is. It's Earl's break on Browns Ferry Blues, which is on the album, and it goes. business here. He'd never done anything like that anywhere on any commercial recording, maybe in 1958 at some obscure country music park. But all these slithery, slidey things, and he does that on a couple of tunes there. So I really had to be paying close attention to the tablature to go. Except I've got that memorized now. Now I do, but yeah, so I was really trying to be really careful to get it note for note. So yeah, it wasn't from memory.
I mean, you've done a lot of, you've done a lot of transcriptions of Earl's music, so you really know his style well. This is a good example, though, that like when you're just playing not for a recording, but just playing with a friend that's not supposed to be recorded, and you're just playing around, just jamming. Right. You might kind of try things. Did you find that his playing was kind of was different in ways, or kind of adventurous in a certain way they wouldn't typically use?
That's a great question. Absolutely. I mean, not every tune, but certain tunes like that right there, I mean, that's totally off the wall. Mm-hmm. And his version of Cripple Creek, which is on the album with Dudley Connell and Michael Cleveland and Jake Jolliffe and Jared Engel, he did something like this. So there's so much information there where he goes, first of all, we always think of him going, and here he goes, he just stays up there, which I love. I think it's so subtle, but so cool. And then this. What's that? And then. Talk about the same thing is from Brown Story Blues. He really got into the slithery, slidey thing, not to mention Cripple Creek. With all these bluesy things, and those are all backward rolls. And Earl once said to me, not in an interview, it just came up in conversation, that he thought what he brought to the banjo was syncopation. And there's so much syncopation in these recordings. Where the notes are landing in places you don't expect them to land, which would be the downbeat. And that's a case in point, just groupings of 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that. So yeah, there were some really amazing things he's doing there. Or Little Maggie, this is a very subtle thing. Hits that note instead of that note. Or the ending that I just played for Cripple Creek. That's from the Jams. Or the Sending. Can I play a little bit more with your permission?
Yeah, definitely.
Casey Jones, which is on the album, and I'll play a little bit of the tune, pretty much note for note the way he played it, or very close to it, and then the ending is what Earl played. That was the ending. Where'd that come from? What's that? You know?
Yeah.
Just these crazy things that we've never heard him do anywhere else. And I think a lot of this was just spontaneous. And I was talking to Bob Carlin, who played with John Hartford for some number of years, great clawhammer player and author, Bob is. And I talked to him just a few days ago. And one thing that occurred to me was there are so many tunes that we've never heard either of them play, John or Earl, and they just sound perfect. They just sound great. Earl's timing is totally spot on, and they're playing these, things like "Here Comes the Bride," for instance, or "Lady Madonna," and they just there's no problem. They just do it perfectly, and I knew that they didn't just sit down. Okay, let's play Here Comes the Bride. Let's practice it for 10 minutes first. So in the jam, they just did it, and I confirmed that with Bob Carlin. He said, yeah, John, they didn't just rehearse the stuff. They just played it spontaneously, and that's what's so surprising about it. How together it all is. It's just fantastic, every bit of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was clean. Like it wasn't just sloppy. It wasn't them just messing around sort of thing. It was actually together.
Yeah, I mean, they could have done it in the studio, and it would have been a first take. In just about every case, yeah.
Had you had the chance to watch Earl just jam backstage or anything personally?
No, unfortunately not. I was never at any of these jams. I got to see. I was at Merlefest, I don't know, a bunch of years ago, and the Chieftains were there, and they had this album where they used a bunch of folks from Nashville. And Earl was on one of the cuts, and so I got to watch them rehearse with Earl, and they did some set of 3 or 4 Celtic tunes, and but then they would have Jerry Douglas play a solo in the midst of it, and Earl played Sally Gooden is the tune that he played. You know, that's what Earl will play in the midst of this session. That's the only time. It wasn't really jamming, but it was sort of a rehearsal kind of a situation. So,
yeah.
But yeah.
With a couple questions coming in, good questions coming in. One from Jajito saying, Tony, is there always room for improvisation in your solos, or is everything always rehearsed note by note? Is there a mix of this? How do you think your solos?
Well, except for this album project where I'm playing note for note Earl off tablature, my solos, a lot of them are totally. A lot of them are very improvised, and I can really take things out. I mean, let me think. I could do a little bit of Little Maggie or something and just go out for a moment. So that was, I mean, there were a couple of things that I have done before, but most of that was improvised. And that ending was Earl's. It's another one of Earl's from the jams. Another one of those, like, what is that?
Yeah. It's a hard thing to do. It's a different mental, especially when you do a lot of improvising, to play something correct, note for note, correctly. Did you find that a hard mental switch to make? You know, because sometimes just playing can be easier in a certain way, other than when you have to play something exactly right.
Yeah, it was much harder just playing exactly what he played. I mean, it was, I don't know, I guess I could say an honor to have the ability to do this, and the chance to do this. And I didn't just go and do this. I spoke to Gary Scruggs to make sure he was okay with me going forward with this project. And he said, as long as you do it, you know, honorably or something to that effect. And then he died 2 weeks later, very suddenly, unexpectedly. And so then I figured I mean, it was just his word, but I wanted to make sure I had it in writing. So I spoke to Gary's sons, 2 of his sons, and they gave their permission. I also spoke to John Hartford's daughter, Katie, and asked, you know, made sure she was okay with it, and they all gave the go-ahead for it. So, yeah, I didn't want to just go off like a loose cannon or something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it was all note for note. And it was hard, again, as I said, everyone else just got to do what they do and can play freely, and I had to suffer needfully reading off the tablature.
Well, we've got a couple questions asking about if you'll ever be publishing tablature, but I think that's a good segue to bring in Marcus from ArtistWorks and start talking about your ArtistWorks lessons. So hey, Marcus, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Marcus.
Hey, always good to see you, Tony.
Great to
Congrats
see
on
you.
the Earl Jam release. It's an absolute masterpiece. This has been a pleasure to sit backstage and watch everything so far.
Oh, thanks so much.
Yeah, so just wanted to talk about a couple things. Before the release of the album, you visited ArtistWorks Studios
Mm-hmm.
and filmed another huge batch of lessons, as you're known to do.
Yep.
It draws the point that you've been teaching with ArtistWorks since 2009.
Mm-hmm.
So 15 plus years of building this banjo education legacy. You've been back year after year, hundreds of lessons. Tell us a little bit about the new lessons that you shot on this last shoot.
I just did a whole bunch of different things. What I try to do is do some beginning lessons, some intermediate lessons, and some advanced lessons, so everyone gets a little bit of, everyone has something to work with. Amongst them, the most recent lessons came up today. It's a 6-part thing. What I do, and you're helping me film, of course, Marcus, and I'll just go in and I have this tablature all prepared, and I'll play off the tablature. And then I explain, what I've got. So if people don't want to be stuck with tablature, I explain it clearly enough for the most part that they could just listen to me talk about it. And it's usually a 3-camera shoot. The current lessons that came out today are pentatonics, about 5-note scales, and just all sorts of variations, tunes I've written about using that jumping off point. Another one that I recorded was Groundhog, which is a delicious. I had groundhog for dinner last night. It was really good. Anyway, and we actually have had a groundhog in our. Wow, I hadn't thought of it. We've had a groundhog in our yard recently. Okay, keep that in mind. Anyway, a groundhog, which is more of a. I think I have it in the intermediate lessons. And anyway, that gives an idea, and that's just a couple. I don't remember exactly how many I did at the time, but I'll try to do 10 or 15 or sometimes 20 lessons at a time. And that's the beautiful thing about ArtistWorks, because with a book, and I've written, I think, 15 instruction books over the years until I started doing ArtistWorks. And with a book, when you hand it in and it's published, that's it, it's done. With this ArtistWorks scheme, you can just add infinitely. So I know there are at least 300 lessons there now. And I've got interviews. I've got at least 50, I think a little over 50 interviews with all the major players: Ralph Stanley, Earl Scruggs, Sonny Osborne, Bill Emerson, Alison Brown, B.B. Bowness, Bela, Noam Pikelny. I mean, I could go on and on. And Jesse McReynolds, we got to Michael Daves, who is also on ArtistWorks doing a bluegrass vocals school. Got to visit with Jesse McReynolds when he was, I think, 91. This would have been a few years ago, and then he just passed in the last year or so. I'm so glad we were able to capture that. And we also did a recording with Frank Wakefield, who's a mandolin player. Did an interview with him, which hopefully will be coming up soon as well. So it's almost all banjo, but there are a couple of exceptions here and there. And it's so people can just go and bathe in the interviews, and because I figured I want to have other people's points of view, not just my own, because everyone's got something different to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is just hundreds of lessons. So we just added these 6 new lessons today in the intermediate section. These are all progressively stepped for players of any level. Like I just bought a banjo I'd never picked before, and I started at the beginning, and now I'm picking all day long. It's great. I've learned a lot from you, and thank you for that.
So welcome.
But it's an endless source of content. 50 plus interviews. They're about an hour long. I mean, you've got people like Pete Seeger. There's just legacy of the instrument there. You've got guest teachers, everyone starting from, I think, Steve Martin back in the day.
Yeah.
You've got Bob Carlin on there teaching clawhammer. It's just an amazing resource for anyone that wants to get into banjo. And then the video exchange component is just really what makes it unique, to where we're not just watching you break these lessons down, but we can perform it. We can show you what we're working on. We can show you our questions. When we hit a stumbling block, we can show you what's happening, and you're the master. So you can show us how to get past that by way of video exchange. We send you a video, you send a video back, and it's shared for the whole community. So even if you're shy and you don't feel like filming yourself, you can watch the questions that other people ask, and it's just really great. And yeah, so just on this last shoot, one of the things of note that you filmed was a companion lesson series for the Earl Jam album.
Right.
So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, Julie, our dear friend Julie from England, is asking that very question. And yes, there are some new tunes from the Earl Jam album. In fact, coincidentally, last night I put up, someone, I don't remember who asked, but someone on the site asked if I would be doing San Antonio Rose, which I recorded with Sierra Farrell on Earl Jam, if I would have the tablature for Earl's solo that I played on there. And last night I put up the tablature. I worked it up yesterday, and transcribed it and put it up there. And then today, later today, I will be doing a home message video on it, which is another aspect, because I don't always get out to Napa or down to Florida, which is where I would go these days to film lessons. But in the interim, people can say, hey, what about, can you, do a home message video, which is on the home page. And then the tablature is in a place called study materials. So I can, and these are basically lessons unto themselves, and it's a whole other zone where there have to be 60 or 70 lessons right there, aside from the other regular 300 lessons. So later today, there'll be a brand new Earl Jam tune-up.
Very cool. And yeah, so far we've got lessons from you recently for Earl Jam tracks. Browns Ferry Blues is there,
Yeah.
Cripple Creek, and Lady Madonna, including your tablature that you made for all of these.
Right, right.
I know there was some questions coming through about tablature earlier, so yeah, we've got a couple of these ticked off, and we look forward to more for sure.
They'll keep coming, yes.
Yeah. And just real quick on the video exchanges, before we started this, I dropped in just to sort of get a read on the meter. This is amazing. So you've done 12,978 video exchanges with students.
Wow.
And
You are right on the verge of 13,000.
I'm so weary. No.
So we're talking about hundreds of lessons. We're talking about thousands of video exchanges, and each one of these is a master class. There is literally endless content.
Yeah, I mean, what I try to do with each one is, not every one, but many of them, I'll do a variation. Whatever the tune is or the technique that they've been working on, I'll do a variation on it. So they have a little extra information. And so there's a video exchange archive, and people can go and check out, okay, I'm working on Boil and Cabbage Down, which is one of the beginning lessons, and people can go in there, and if they go to they can watch my whole response, or they can just go to the end, and that's where I do all the variations. So rather than only having one way to play the tune, there are many with tunes like Boil and Cabbage Down, because I've done so many responses on that. So there is other information in there as well. In fact, I responded to a VE yesterday. We call them VEs, video exchanges. I was going to do a response. I didn't get a chance to do it, but one of my students had done Clinch Mountain Backstep by Ralph Stanley, which I have in the tablature in the home message video archive. And there's some special way of doing that I just transcribed for the site, which I'd never known. It was some really obscure thing that Ralph did. Instead of going, he went, and then he did a forward roll and did a hammer on 0 to 3 without hitting that string. And after playing Clinch Mountain Backstep for 60 years, thanks to this school, I learned how to play it the right way. So I learn it often as much as the students do while I'm trying to figure out something for them. Or sometimes when someone has passed, a banjo player has passed, like Sonny Osborne, we've lost a lot of people in the last year and a half, 2 years. Ben Eldridge passed away recently, so he of the seldom seen for many years, and a good friend. I worked up one of his solos for the site, so there's always new stuff coming out.
Fantastic. Yeah, just talk a little bit more about just the community, because I mean, what you started with was a school of lessons, right? But what it's turned into is really sort of a hub for banjo pickers. can you talk just a little bit about the community that you foster? We call you the mayor of Banjo Town.
It really has become a community. For many years, I think it's been a community because I look at it as a family, and I don't mean that, and I'm not overstating it, because we're all in this together, you know. And there's so much division in the country, and we have people from overseas. We've had people from Moscow, South Africa, Japan, all over Europe, England, Scotland, Ireland, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on, Australia, Mexico, and but we're all here for the love of the instrument, and music transcends all boundaries of all sorts, political, religious, otherwise. We're just all in this together. And plus, some people share personal things that they're going through, health issues, you know, some fairly personal things, and they'll share it. There's an area called the Shouts where people can just, you know, give some sort of short a question or an explanation, or in some cases, like I said, you know, I'm going through chemotherapy or whatever. I mean, some really pretty personal things, and people come together on the site and say, "I'm so sorry to hear that. We're sending lots of love or prayers or whatever it is." So there is this really wonderful feeling. Or when people do their first video exchange submission, I respond to it, and then I mention it. You know, I upload it to the site, and then I mention it in the Shouts that we have a brand new first timer doing this wonderful version of this tune, and please welcome them. And people do that, and so it is a welcoming community. It's a really beautiful thing in that sense.
Yeah, I want to chime in real fast. I have a little story. I was just in Spain this past year, and I get out of my cab right when I get there, and I have a banjo on my back, and the very first guy on the street yells to me, "Hey, is that a banjo?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, I take lessons with Tony Trischka on ArtistWorks." Like, I'm like, "Oh,
Small
fantastic." And now we're in touch, and you know, so there's this community thing that's all around the world. It's great.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it is nice. And then there's something called the forums where people can ask me questions. It's Ask Tony, and I respond, you know, banjo-related questions. And they can also just speak to the community at large. There's an area there. And if you've signed up recently, you're a newbie, as it were, you can say, "Hey, I've just joined up." Someone just joined up the other day, and they've been very active in the Shouts and the forums. So it's such an interactive community. It's great that way.
Yeah, very cool. Well, Tony, I mean, we can't thank you enough for what you've built for the rest of the world to learn and live with. It's just fantastic, and you know, it's always a treat to be in your presence and hear you play. And you know, you're so encouraging as a teacher. It's really great. I know first getting started with banjo can be daunting. It doesn't come immediately for some of us. It was a challenge to get over that first sort of like, how do you get the first roll started kind of thing for me. But I got there, and it's just so rewarding to be able to make the music sing out of a banjo. And thank you to Deering as well. Like, you guys have been fantastic working with ArtistWorks over all these years, and I play a Deering, love the sound, have only ever played a Deering, only ever will. So thank you so much for putting the show on today. I'll pass it back to you guys, and thanks again, Tony. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, great to see you, Marcus. You're one of my favorite folks, so love doing the lessons. We get to hang and go out to great dinners too.
Yeah.
As opposed to
I didn't want to get in on that part.
As opposed to the breakfasts we had today. So,
well, I want to bring Jamie in, and I want to kind of transition to our announcing of the winners of the Earl Jam giveaway we did with ArtistWorks and yourself and yourselves. So
Absolutely.
Jamie, do you have anything to say about this?
No, I mean, it was well, first of all, just again, thanks to Marcus and Richard, who's kind of watching from afar from ArtistWorks, for helping us put this together today and helping with the contest. Tony, it's just always a pleasure to hear you talk, to watch you play, and to kind of share those little nuggets of wisdom that you do. I don't think I had an appreciation for what the ArtistWorks platform is capable of. I was under the impression that it was very much a one-to-one kind of almost private interaction, but it sounds like it's not. It sounds like it's a much more kind of community-based. Everything's open. We all learn from each other's questions and that kind of thing, which is phenomenal. I haven't used it personally. I will be the first to admit that. But it sounds like you're just doing some wonderful things. So thank you for everything that you do, and obviously congratulations on the album. Couldn't agree with you more. Music is the most fundamental thing, I think, in my world, and I think a lot of people's worlds, that kind of bring everybody together, and it's one of the few things that we all can share, regardless of musical taste. We all have a connection with music as a kind of fundamental human thing, I think. So I think it's vitally important that you play that role that you're playing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to my dear friend and manager, Ben Hirschman, who, without whom, a lot of this wouldn't be happening, and for just putting a lot of this together. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
He's right over here. He's right over there.
Bring him in, man. Have him do a little wave.
Do a little wave. You're being asked to do a little wave.
There you go. Perfect wave technique. I love it. Excellent. Well, let's jump in, shall we? So this was a really well-received contest. So there was 3 winners. We ran it. We had literally thousands of entries into this thing, which was great. There can only be 3. There's a grand prize winner who would receive the banjo, which I'll show in a minute because it's sitting right here. The signed copy of the vinyl copy of the album, a year's supply. Oh, there you go. A year's supply, subscription to ArtistWorks, Tony's school, and then some finger picks from ProPick as well. Second prize was, if I remember, Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's 3 months to ArtistWorks. It was the signed vinyl and the heritage finger picks, and then the third place winner was going to be the 1 month subscription to ArtistWorks, signed vinyl, and the Supertone pick, I believe, if I recall correctly. You would think I'd have this written down in front of me. Not that organized today. But so from the bottom up, from third to first, Tony, you have the names. Let's make that announcement.
Well, in third place we have Laura C. And thank you, Laura, for entering and being in third place. I mean, out of thousands, that's a lot. And shall I go to second place?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. We have, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, David Yanisco, and congratulations, David, for your successful entry. And the grand prize winner from, as I understand, Oaxaca, Mexico, yes, Zach Arno.
All right, Zach.
Congratulations, Zach.
Yeah.
As luck would have it, he was cruising around the internet and he stumbled his way into this live stream. What are the odds? Hey, Zach, how you doing?
There you are.
Congratulations,
Hi, everyone.
Zach.
Yeah, thank you so much. I can't believe this, and I thought it was, when I heard about winning this, I thought it was like a scam or something, and it wasn't actually till I just joined this live stream that I really believed it. So it's amazing. Yeah, so lucky. Thanks.
So let's take a quick look at the banjo. I know you've got a couple of questions for Tony, but just while I've got it right here before we ship it out to you, it's a good time too. Signed on the head,
nice.
And then the custom. Let's see if I can get that in there. Custom peg head right there.
Snappy.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the Earl Jam logo.
Yeah.
Let's see the resonator. Let's see the resonator. There we go. Beautiful.
I can't get this right.
There we go.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a big upgrade for me, definitely. So
There you go.
yeah.
Perfect. And we'll be, and to Zach and all the winners, everything will be shipping out from Deering, so we'll be getting those out before the end of the week. And all the ArtistWorks subscriptions will be taken care of by Marcus and the team over there, so you'll hear from them directly. So, Zach, I know you had a couple of kind of questions lined up for Tony.
And then I have something for you, Zach, after your question.
Okay.
So yes.
Cool. Yeah, I guess I have a question that's like pretty technical actually about playing the banjo, and it seems like I should take this opportunity. Although I could ask you later on ArtistWorks too. But so like I've been playing banjo and guitar for quite a while, and But most of my banjo playing until recently was kind of clawhammer based,
Mm-hmm.
and guitar, like most of it wasn't like flat picking. But then in like more recent year or two, I've been wanting to learn both flat picking on guitar more and three finger on banjo and getting into
Right.
that. And I mean, it's hard. And one thing I noticed that's really hard about it, and I don't have the same issue with clawhammer, is like I don't know what you tell people or you recommend people do if they kind of miss a note, or like how do you recover? Like because if you start a roll with the wrong finger because you missed it, you're kind of stuck in that. Do you tell them to just go with it, or do you kind of have a technique for resetting that you would recommend? And I find the same thing with flat picking as well. Like I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great question. I think if you're just sitting around at home, it doesn't matter. You know, you can stop and what I suggest is if it's one problem that keeps recurring in one place, then just take that one measure or two measures, whatever it is, and loop it at a slow tempo with a metronome. Just play it 20, 25 times till you drive people around you crazy. And just loop it over and over again, and then insert it into the tune rather than playing it one tempo and then dipping down really slowly where you're struggling with it and then go back up. Of course, if you're on stage, if you're in a jam session, you just got to just keep the fingers moving, you know, just whatever you just stay with it, you know, keep time as best as possible. But I always recommend working with a metronome for at least some of the time, and that'll sort of keep you in the groove. And again, if you're just sitting around at home practicing and you make a mistake, then you know you can stop and analyze what's going on. But today, just warming up for this, I spent about 20 minutes with a metronome, and sometimes I'll spend an hour. Currently, you know, and I've been playing for over 60 years, so, and I know Bela Fleck does the same thing. So it's not like, okay, I'm beginning, I'll use a metronome, then I don't have to use it anymore. We still use it, you know, anytime we're working on something new, or again, if you have an issue like that. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah. So if you were in like a jam session, you wouldn't necessarily like stop for a second and try to get it so you're on the right fingering again.
No, the stream is going on, the river's going on. You got to just stay with it.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's playing along with you. Just
Yeah.
you know, we all make mistakes. I take a lot of chances when I improvise, and so I have moments that are less than salutary, and so you recover. You know, you just try to stay in time as best you can.
Okay.
We're all
Yeah,
learning. So yeah.
Okay, that's good to hear from you. And then I was also curious. You're playing with a lot of like newer, like the new generation of players that I've seen on this album, and it's amazing. But usually when you're playing with them, you're the banjo player, and they might be playing guitar or something else. So I was wondering if you have anyone that you could recommend, or like that you've been kind of really enjoying listening to who's new on banjo. Any newish like people coming out more recently that you know, yeah, you could recommend.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I was just out at Elderly Instruments giving a workshop out there, and there's a young man named Dante Flores who's 12 years old, and he's been to Bela Fleck's Blue Ridge Banjo Camp for the last couple of years, and he's turning into a really good banjo player. And then there's another young man, Nikolai Margulis, who's 16, maybe barely 17 now, who also has been at Bela's Banjo Camp since he was 12 years old. And he's like incredible. He can play Bela things. He's composing his own tunes. In fact, last year at Bela's camp, Bela always has something for all 100 banjo players to play. And a lot of the times he arranges all the parts himself. But last year he had Nikolai at the age of 15 or 16 arrange the Stormtroopers theme from Star Wars for 100 banjo players. And so, I mean, this kid is like totally amazing. And there are others as well.
He's good.
Yeah, there's a really strong younger generation coming up. And again, many of them are at Bela's camp. You're getting to see these people that are just like, you can't be that good. Come on. You're scaring the old folks. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. So there were some really great young players coming up.
Nice. Yeah, I'll check them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to
How-
take up too much time, but if you said you had a question for me.
It's not a question for you, but I asked you what your birthday was, and it's May 17th. Can I share it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
it's
ahead.
May 17th, 1988. And I asked you that because if I'd gotten this information earlier, I would have done more with it. But if you assign a note to every date, okay, so it's 5/17, 5/17, 1988. So, let's say you're in the key of G. So the fifth note of the G scale is D, and then you have the 1 from the 17. And then the seventh note could be flatted, but let's say it's a major seventh, or the regular seventh degree of the scale. And then back to 1 for the 1 of the 1988. And then 9, and then 8/8, the octave higher, and you get. And I sort of expanded on that a little bit. This is just very kind of last minute. It's short, but that's a musical interpretation of your birthday. Happy birthday.
Oh,
A little bit
wow!
late.
Thank you. I'm gonna have to learn that one. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's very
Yes.
cool.
send in a video exchange and I'll play it for you. You might have to remind me of your birthday again. But
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Nice.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, composition is a thing I stress a lot on the site also. Once people are working on like intervals of sixths, I'll say, okay, once we do that lesson, I'll say, okay, now compose a tune using sixths or thirds. Okay, compose something using thirds, etc., etc. So, and one of the techniques is taking a birthday, or if you want to give me your bank routing number, I could. Just a suggestion. Yeah.
Pretty funny.
Nice.
Well, thank you, Zach. Congratulations.
Congratulations,
Yeah,
Zach.
thank
That's
you.
so great.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna get this out to shipping and get this boxed up and on its merry way to you. Tony, I'll give you his address and maybe you can figure out something on that as well,
Okay.
musically. No, that's awesome. Tony, any final words of wisdom?
Boy, I don't know. Just when you're learning, try not to get too frustrated. We're all learning. I certainly am learning. I just transcribed some new Earl stuff yesterday, so and you can have frustrating moments. And I even have a lesson on that on the site. Keep a positive attitude. Don't beat yourself up. And not to give another plug for this ArtistWorks school, but for all the schools, there are a lot of bluegrass schools indeed. But when you send in a video exchange, and it's a really valuable thing for people. I have this one woman who's been with me for I think 9 years on the site, and she can go back to the exchanges she did her first year, and then you can go back. Wow, I'm so frustrated. I feel like I'm on a plateau. I'm not getting anywhere. And then, well, go back to your first VE or second VE and look how far you've come. Because the first lesson is, and that's pretty basic. And then they're going to go, on the third or the seventh lesson, whatever. But then all the way down the line, there's a definite sign of progress, and you can see it yourself. So anyway, but be positive. Don't beat yourself up. And no, I can't do it, because you can, and you will, and you'll just keep going.
There's a reason you're the master, why you're the mayor of Banjo Town.
I've never had that appellation before, but I'll take it. Thank you.
Marcus, I think you need to organize like a jacket of some kind with that on the back, right?
Can I get a sash or something?
Yeah, right. I think something might be in order. A fancy hat of some sort.
Something.
Although I can't do the socks though, because you've got that covered.
Yes,
You have
I
the
had-
coolest socks of
Okay.
anyone that's ever come in this studio. So
My gift to you.
Fantastic. Well, guys, thank you so much. So we want to take a minute, just obviously thank you, Tony. Thank you to ArtistWorks. Thank you for everyone who entered the competition, and thank you for everyone who tuned in to this episode and will be watching in the post-live version, which will be available right after this airs. Guys, thank you. Tony, you want to play us out with one last little thing before we hit the road?
Yeah, I'll play a tune that I wrote recently and combine it with another tune that I wrote a while back.
Awesome.
And let's see.